You are comfortably zoned with the Zigzag Man in Alameda, California, pushing on the doors of life marked pull and fighting the unholy Trinity as we go. Big business, organized religion, and government. You are comfortably zoned back with the Zigzag Man in Alameda, California at the 420 Studios on the road at Albert's this morning, the longest running cafe in Alameda's history. And I'm with Brother Scott, and Linda just brought us a burrito. Say hello, Linda. You're an icon in Alameda.
Good morning from Alameda, Albert's Cafe. Come on down.
Who's cooking the grub this morning?
Alfonso, always.
Alfonso, always. Is that his last name? Was it a shortening?
But he's always the cook.
Always the cook. Okay, so we don't use last names?
No.
Beautiful. We're going to do a segment on the Middle East this morning.
All right.
And I got Brother Scott with me, who is the maven of what's going on in far-off places that generally we don't know. Linda and I, we don't know what the hell's going on, right?
No, I try to read the paper as much as I can, but he explains it better.
Okay, and that's exactly what I am. I try not to read the paper, and he explains it better.
All right.
So, all right, Linda, thanks for being with us.
Oh, thank you. You're welcome.
All right, Brother Scott. We're gonna chow down on our burritos, and in between, because it's Thursday, the 12th of June, the year of our Lord, 2014. I want to be real dated about this because shit's hit the fan again in Iraq. Fox News is going crazy. Obama can't do anything right. I really don't know what's going on, but Scott always does, and you're the maven. Brother Scott, let me know. What's happening in the world today?
Ralph, you're extravagant.
Well, thank you.
We start out by saying we don't know what's going on. I don't always know. I don't know in this case for sure. But I can tell you what the newspapers say. It says Thursday, June 12th in the Tribune, Bay Area News Group newspaper, another city in Iraq falls as militants close in on Baghdad.
All right. So my question is, how is this going to affect us? Are we going to go back in and defend one side or the other, which is not the side that we installed? Let me know.
Well, first of all, what you mean we, Paleface?
Well, let's put it this way: the government, and as an extension, the economic draft. Our children are going to be once again forced with the decision of defending our country, going in there. We, the government.
All right, well, that's an oxymoron. But my sense is we ought to butt out. Because we, as you describe it, have only made it much, much worse than it would have been had we and every other foreign power butt out.
Okay, how can we butt out, given that we have such a dependency on their oil, and it's vital that we keep that open and going? I'm talking about big businesses' idea that it's vital that we don't become less oil dependent and keep the flow of oil from that region going towards us. So we're never going to butt out. So, assuming that we'll get in there again, do you feel this will escalate to the point where we're putting troops and boots on the ground?
Ralph, I can't accept the terminology. Somebody once said all science, all true science, begins with classification. We got to come to grips with the terms we. You keep using the collective we and roping into it all kinds of bad elements I don't want to be associated with, nor does any other decent thinking person. What you mean we, Paleface? We don't have a dependency on their oil. That's a myth.
We the people aren't dependent to keep oil going at $4 a gallon.
You're saying a whole lot of different things now. I'm only saying this economy in North America is not dependent on the oil from the Middle East. This economy in North America is not dependent on the oil from the Middle East.
Well, we're led to believe that in every way, because unless you're saying we could be more freely drilling offshore and contaminating our coasts, Alaska on down, is that the solution you have for not being oil dependent?
Let me ask you this. I don't know the answer to this, but it's a pertinent question, and something might really hinge on it. Is the United States a net exporter or a net importer of oil? Do you know?
Well, I do know that they import the oil that is not crude, and they export the oil that they produce that is crude to Japan and what have you, so that from the standpoint of oil that we need, usable oil, we're an importer. Non-usable oil by our standards, we're an exporter.
All right, then let's limit it a little bit more. Is the United States or Canada a net importer or a net exporter of crude oil?
Exporter of crude oil, I would say. That's my guess.
In both cases, I think you're probably right. Now, what does that tell you about oil dependency?
That we're just as oil dependent on the usable oil as we ever were, and that
something more than that. A dependency means you require something additional to what you produce. You need something else to help you. That's what the dependency is.
Yeah, because we're not producing it. We can't produce it. It would take years to refine the oil that we're producing, given that we don't want to screw up our own ecology.
You know, all the other extraneous factors we're bringing in now, we start with a simple question and proposition. Are we a net importer or a net exporter? Because are we dependent on, and leaving aside for 1 second the term we, which I strongly object to.
Right.
But is it objectively true that oil flows from the Middle East to the North American continent, or does North American oil flow outward? In other words, if you're dependent on somebody else, you need what they've got. Do we need what they've got? Does this continent need what they've got?
Absolutely.
Then why are we exporting what we already have?
Because it's crude and not usable.
It's crude wherever it's taken, from Saudi Arabia or from the United States.
No, we're getting a much more refined oil from Saudi Arabia than we're exporting to Japan. And
those are facts I don't know. But,
okay.
but it sounds like what you're saying is the refining capacity is superior in some way, or there's more of it overseas than there is here.
Whatever it is, I'm not a total expert on it. I do know that we both export and import oil, and I know that we're exporting the oil that even if we produce more of, it would be crude from our own coastline and the pipeline from Alaska.
And how is it to our advantage along those lines, with that in mind, what you just said? How is it to the advantage of those interests to import from abroad what they've already got at home? If they got to refine oil, they can refine oil from the North American continent, or they can refine oil from the Saudi Arabia, from the Middle East.
I think the price of refining the oil has something to do with it. But notwithstanding, we're dealing with them because...
Now it sounds like they're dependent on the price of refining. More than anybody's dependent on the oil itself. The price of refining will determine which way the production flows. And if you can refine it cheaper over there, you're going to refine it over there, and you're going to export the stuff you drill out of your own soil and send it to the refineries you built over there, because that's where it's cheaper to do it.
Right, but we're sending it to like Japan. We're sending crude oil to Japan, the way I understand it.
And they're refining it there.
And Japan does their thing, with it. Okay. My question is, if we became less oil dependent, as in we, when I say we, the people become less oil dependent and more solar dependent, wind dependent, alternative energy that is not detrimental to the ecology, let alone the price of going over there with American lives and killing people of all nationalities and rebuilding their cities and taking away from our social programs, would we not be better off? And you're going to say, of course, right?
Yeah, but I don't know why you would leave them out of the equation. That everybody would be better off. Everybody. Them
Would be
and us.
Okay.
Would be better off.
So we basically have the logical solution that we've discussed many, many times over the years, over the months. Now, I have this problem. We've identified it. I've come to the very, very sad conclusion that because, again, the religious zealots on all sides, and when I say all sides, I mean here in America as well, are controlling the politicians either by preaching from the pulpit or giving money to their campaigns, one way or the other, and but they do it. And the vast differences in beliefs as to which part of Jerusalem or whom Jerusalem really belongs to, the Christians, the Muslims, or the Jews, with that basic problem going. What could ever solve that? How could there ever, this is pragmatic on my point, cynical, whatever you want to call it, how can we ever get by that one little patch of land in Jerusalem being so important to me? Because most Christians think, well, we don't really care much about the Semitics of it all. If the Arabs disappeared from the world, fine. If the Jews disappeared, if they all disappeared, we'd have Jerusalem. The Jews, basically the Israeli Jews, don't care much about Christianity or Muslims. And the Muslims don't care much about Christianity and Judaism. Are we ever going to get by that? I'm just rhetorical. Just want your thinking on it.
Science marches on.
Science marches on. Okay, so some way, the logic of it all, of science, will come in, people will go, whoa, what are we doing here? Now, how long will that take to change?
It's not written in the stars. It's totally dependent on what advantage we take of opportunities provided by circumstances as they unfold. If people sit on their ass and do nothing, nothing will happen. If they get off their ass and do something, something will happen. kind of works like that.
Okay. Do you suppose we're going to be sending troops into Iraq now?
I'm not sending troops anywhere, and I don't think you are either.
No, but
So
you
I think
suppose,
American
when I
troops
keep
will
saying,
show up.
I do have to get out of the habit of saying we, because I'm not the one making a decision, you're not the one making a decision, and those who are chosen in government are not our representation anymore, the way I look at it. So I have to say, replace we with the powers that be. Do you think the powers that be will be sending we, the people, over there to get involved yet again in someone else's crisis?
Not if they can talk some poor Romanians into doing it for them.
All right. That might be the way to go.
Subcontract it out. Contract it out if you can do it. It's cheaper and it's less painful. In the end, it's also less professional, and they do a poorer job of it. But if you can contract it out, that's probably the best way to go.
So the big countries are going to have little armies of French Foreign Legion folks coming in under the guise of big business to protect people like Halliburton. They'll have their own individual little freedom-fighting armies.
They've got Iraq as a blueprint already. The way it unfolded is more or less the way it will be next time too. Everybody will line up at the trough who's got a corporate interest in that part of the economy and preach the loudest sermons on patriotism and victory till, forever. And we'll see how it unfolds. A lot depends on who's sitting on their butt and who's out motivated and doing something.
Do you think, as I do, that the economy is being kept down deliberately to provide fodder, either private armies or military army?
No.
Okay, what's keeping the economy down, do you think?
Its inherent contradictions are keeping it down. You don't have to have a grand design. In fact, it lacks a grand design. But it's naturally inclined to these kinds of collisions and cataclysms every generation or so. And you can plot them on a graph, starting with the beginning of the Industrial Revolution, and gauge their frequency and duration with reasonable accuracy just by eyeballing it. But it's more complicated than that, of course. But it's inherent, that's my point. It's inherent and recurring, and they can never get out of it. It repeats itself endlessly and brings about new and greater disasters as time goes by. They're getting worse. They're not getting better.
Well, that's realism for you. That's what you get uncomfortably zoned, because knowing sometimes is the booby prize, but knowledge is power, and you get it with Brother Scott on a periodic basis. Thank you, sir, for being here.
I don't have any scrambled eggs on my bill or my hat.
All right. That's, it's nice that you don't. Oh, man. But the ones that do have an inherent interest in keeping it all going, and they seem to influence the powers that be, but not we. All right, I'll end this segment the way I generally do. I'm going to keep it nice and simple. Linda, let me keep this nice and simple. I'm going to end the segment by saying this. Keep your dreams wet and your humor dry. Keep your kids off the laps of military recruiters. No, keep your kids off the laps of clerics wearing dresses and out of military recruiters' offices. Is that a good suggestion?
Sounds good to me.
You don't want your kid at a military recruiter?
No.
Why not? Just from your own?
Well, I just don't want him to die
Needlessly.
needlessly.
Okay, and how about keeping your kid off the laps of clerics wearing dresses? That's a good idea for everybody, don't you think?
So, yes.
Okay, now, why would that be? Don't even have to say it.
Y'all got tables to wait.
See you later. All right, everybody. Comfortably zoned, Alameda, California, 420 Studios on the road. Albert's, the best cafe. It's on Webster, and we learned a lot from Brother Scott. See you later.